Welcome to Remembering You, a space for slowing down, seeing again, and gathering the parts of yourself that the world asked you to forget.
Each week, we wander through stories, ancient, personal, and collective, to explore how perspective changes everything. How what we look at and how we look can open doors to who we truly are.
Take a breath, feel your feet.
You've arrived.
Let's begin remembering you.
Welcome, my love.
Hi.
Remembering you.
Remembering you.
So as we have been reflecting on this for a good part of 6 months or more.
Oh, yeah, it's been like 10. But who's counting?
almost a year.
Yeah.
We thought that it would be appropriate to jump into the deep end with more than just a thumbnail sketch of who each of us are.
Yeah.
And let's do that right now.
Mm-hmm. I get to tell you about me.
I would love to hear all the little ins and outs and ups and downs and overs and zigs and zags and everything else that makes up Aliceanne.
I have a colorful story.
I love and treasure every little piece of your story. Start off with telling us what your first name was.
Oh, yeah. So I
You
wasn't
weren't born.
Aliceanne. Yeah. So I was born Carrie Collins. I changed my name the day that you and I got married for reasons that we can talk about later. So now my name is Aliceanne. And we've only been married. Well, our 3-year anniversary is coming up, I think, next week. So I've only been Aliceanne for 3 out of my almost 48 years. But it feels like me. Yeah.
Where did Carrie Ann Patrick
Collins.
Excuse me. That was your married name.
That was my first married name, Patrick. Yeah.
We'll keep it short and simple. Where did Carrie have her genesis?
Yeah. So I was born in Humboldt, Iowa, tiny little Midwestern town north of Des Moines, a couple of hours. And I lived like 15 minutes south of there in a bigger town, but not very big. I think population is like 20,000 maybe. I was born almost on the side of the road in the back seat of a Volkswagen Beetle, or Rabbit. Sorry, it was a Volkswagen Rabbit. Because I was born in the middle of a snowstorm and Mom and Dad almost didn't get to the hospital in time. So I've always been fast, I guess you could say. I was born in a rabbit. And I still move fast. I'll just stop there. What other questions do you have for me?
That's beautiful. Talk about your parents. What is your caregiver experience look like?
Yeah. So Mom was a stay-at-home mom. Dad, blue-collar worker, worked construction. He was a carpenter. He built homes. He also did lots of oddball jobs, like handyman kind of jobs. Delivered a newspaper for years. Helped out just random people who needed a plumbing fix in their house or something rewired electrically. He kind of knew how to do everything. And Mom was very similar on the home front side. She could sew, she baked bread every week. She had a huge garden. And so I'm really grateful that I grew up I know I can do everything from frame a house to bake a loaf of bread. Well, my bread's actually not that great, but I can bake a lot of things and cook a lot of things, and I can grow a garden pretty decent. But I'm handy. And if I don't know how to do something, I know that I'll be able to figure it out. And I think I got that from both my mom and dad. So that's, very beautiful and very positive, so to say. And my childhood on the outside, mom and dad looked pretty picture perfect. But my day-to-day experience was a bit more confusing or intense. I mean, it was my norm, so I didn't really know any differently, but I was never very comfortable in my own home or in my own skin, quite frankly. So my mom was really intense. She was very strict. She was very rigid. I know she meant well. She thought she was doing the right thing by, providing lots of structure and guidance, and there were rules. And of course, kids do need those. But I had the experience of more like walking on eggshells because I was never quite sure when I was going to get in trouble. And she was very harsh about when you broke a rule or did something wrong. It was just felt a little bit like being blindsided. And so I think I have some really visceral memories of like my breath literally being taken away in shock, just like, like where did that come from? And I'm not sure how I got here, and I don't know what to do now. Dad was not very present. I mean, he came home every day as far as I know, but mom certainly ran the house. She had a very strong presence, and dad, he just followed her orders really. And so I would usually go out in the garage, like that's where his shop was. And it always smelled like sawdust. And I just loved that. And I was very much a daddy's girl. And so I'd go hang out with him as much as I could, because quite frankly, he was the more enjoyable parent out of the two.
Oh.
Yeah, he was just easier on the nervous system, perhaps. So yeah, that was my mom and dad.
Give a picture of their families.
Oh, right.
What was the extended family experience like for you?
Mm-hmm. So they both grew up in the same town, even tinier still than the one I was born in. So like 45 minutes north of Fort Dodge is a little town called Livermore, Iowa. I think in its heyday in the, like 40s and 50s and 60s, when it had a school and a library. It doesn't even have a stoplight. Like it's got, I think, a stop sign or two, and a gas station. There were maybe a couple thousand people there, and half of them were my relatives. So my dad was one of 15 children. His mother was one of 22 children. So very big Catholic families. And they all lived like right around there. More than half of my aunts and uncles didn't ever really leave the area. I have 74 first cousins on my dad's side, and my mom was one of 6, so not nearly as big of a family, but certainly still a big family by today's standards. And my mom's mom was really my safe place as a kid. I loved going to her house. We went every Sunday almost for Sunday dinner after church. And then summertime, I literally just lived there. I mean, I'd stay there for the whole time. And I'd hang out with my cousins, and I'd get to see my aunts and uncles and my other grandparents. And I mean, that part of my life feels absolutely picture perfect. Like, my dad's side of the family, they're all jokesters. They're happy. None of them, like, there were never any shouting matches when I was a kid. There was no drama. It was almost like too good. I learned later as an adult kind of the way that maybe that's a sign that people are kind of hiding some deeper hurts. But on the outside, we all got along. And my grandfather, my dad's dad, farmed 2,000 acres. And so after Grandma and Grandpa died, the family inherited that, and I think the siblings kind of split it amongst themselves. And I'm sure there was some kind of drama around it, but nothing that I was ever aware of. But farming is still something that my dad and several of his brothers do, and so it's like that Midwestern salt of the earth kind of vibe. I mean, that's very much the family that I grew up in. Nobody's very proud. Nobody really has any strong opinions about much of anything. They'll go along. You can chat at them all day long. And that I think was pretty influential in my upbringing for sure. 'Cause I very much mirror that in how I relate to myself and to others still.
You mentioned going to church. What was your spiritual context of childhood?
Tortured. So I was raised Catholic. I went to a Catholic school, kindergarten through 12th grade, church twice a week, because we had to go to church during school week, and then, of course, on either Saturday nights or Sunday. I have never really understood Christianity. I'm starting to now as an adult, but I experienced my spiritual upbringing as this, it felt shoved down my throat. It was very intense. It was a lot like my mom. In my Catholic school, sometimes I had nuns as a teacher, and they weren't very nice. They'd kind of whack you on the top of the head with a pair of big, heavy black metal scissors, or, that old, put your hands on the desk and they whack you with the ruler if you do something and get in trouble. I was not a troublemaker because I did not really want to be subjected to corporal punishment. But I saw other kids who did, and it, so I did not get like the kind and loving version of Christianity. It was very much do what you're told. Here's the rules or else. It was very threatening. And my mom kind of mimicked that, like her vibe was very militant. So I tried really hard until I kind of gave up on trying to make sense of religion by my 20s, and then just declared myself to be an atheist. Like I just sort of surrendered. I'm like, nothing else makes sense. But I would read the Bible. I would take, study courses. I'd read different books. I explored different, kind of varieties of Christianity. So I tried going to like a Methodist church and a Episcopalian one and a Lutheran one. I thought maybe it was just Catholicism that was the problem. But I've got some pretty deep spiritual trauma that I'm working through it. But childhood is terrifying, and it didn't make any sense. And it was, the church was beautiful, but it was also kind of scary. It was a rather gory, horrific Jesus hung up on the cross. That was weird. It felt mysterious in the way that like a dark dungeon feels mysterious. So just not conducive for like love and calm and yeah.
Thank you. And then in your early years, you had an experience with a pretty traumatic brain injury.
Yeah.
Would you say a little bit about that experience and what that has done for you in your life?
Yeah. I've always been a very strong-willed, stubborn, rebellious child. I want to do what I want to do, and I don't want you to tell me what to do. So needless to say, my mom and I butted heads a lot. And when I was three and a half, I was in gymnastics, and in gymnastics, when you're really little, they give you these tiny little balance beams. So, they're like 6 inches up off the ground. And I loved those balance beams. I mean, I'd probably walk back and forth on them 100 times if they'd let me. And so my dad, being a carpenter, he was adding on to our house. They had bought a really tiny house, and they were adding on a second story and putting on like an additional 15 feet or so off the back, and dug a bigger basement. And the second story was just the floor joists and kind of the real thin cardboard like subfloor that they put down under the floor joist before they put the plywood on. And I looked at those those floor joists, and I was like, those are balance beams. I want to go walk out on the balance beams. And I remember my dad telling me, like, you can't do that. Like, I don't like, I have this memory of me standing in the doorway looking at that room and being like, those are all just a bunch of balance beams. That looks like the most fun thing in the world. And so after lunch, so it was like a Saturday, and my extended family was there because my aunts and uncles would sometimes come help mom and dad build the house. So it was very busy, and I snuck out under the table and went upstairs and went out to balance on those floor joist balance beams, and I fell through, and I landed on there was a flight of stairs underneath me where I fell through, and I kind of landed like with my back and the back of my head directly on the stairs. And so I had a really severe concussion. They life flighted me from the local hospital down to Des Moines. I was put in a medical coma for a couple of days to help with the brain swelling. And, initially they told my mom and dad they weren't sure if I would walk. They weren't sure if I'd be able to talk. Like, they could tell that the brain injury was profound, but, of course, didn't know how I'd be. And I made a full recovery. I think they discharged me from the hospital within like 10 days or 2 weeks or so. I only have nascent memories. I mean, I was only 3.5. But from what I have come to appreciate in my adulthood as I've learned how to feel my feelings, and as I've gotten familiar with my own nervous system, and as I kind of watch how I react to certain situations or people, I've come to understand that fall was an enormous influence on how I experience my own body and the world around me. So if you kind of once gave a really good analogy in a conversation we had not too long ago. If you've ever had a little kid, like an infant, and so when you pick them up, you hold them under their butt and, kind of hold up their neck and the back of their head. And if you drop them, even just slightly, like, if you kind of quickly move downward, they have a startle response. They'll kind of throw out their arms real stiff, and everything in the body tenses up. And, of course, this is a protective response, that this is a reflex. It's a good thing. And so long as they're like returned to a sense of safety and stability quickly, any being can recover from a startle. Mine was a really profound injury, and to add insult to injury, as they say. My parents were not, like, they weren't touchy-feely, and my mom was really rather cruel. She didn't mean to be, I don't think, but I think it's all she knew. And so, like, there wasn't tenderness. There wasn't, oh my goodness, you're in pain. Let me like hold your hand and console you and make sure that you're, soothed, and let me speak to you in a calming voice. Like I have this, one of my only memories from that time when I was in the hospital was laying in a hospital bed and being in an enormous amount of pain. So, I had this like just blinding headache, I'm sure from the concussion, but then also like all of the bruises and stuff along my back and shoulders and legs from where I fell on the stairs, and like not having anyone notice or be able to help me with the pain. And so I just would stare out the window and look at the trees and I'd kind of just try to distance myself from the pain and from the experience. And I learned how to dissociate from my experience really, really young.
Sure.
And I'm still like learning how to like settle into my own body. I will catch myself tensed up, even when there's nothing happening, even when there is no stressful anything going on, just to like let my shoulders relax, let my neck relax, let my jaw relax, let my belly relax. Like that's kind of a new one, is noticing how much I'm always like my core is always super tense. And so it's a process, that one. Yeah. So
understandably.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like the world just feels dangerous to me at a very unconscious level. And as I've been becoming more conscious of it, I can then kind of work with it and feel through it to the degree that I need to, but I still get surprised all these years later. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Take a little bit of time, and what was it like growing up with siblings?
Oh yeah, I have a brother. He's like just a little over 2 years younger than me. He and I are like, he's my BFF. He's my ride or die. So we've always been close. So we were kids, and of course, there were periods of times where we'd kind of fight and pick on each other, but by and large, we really just got along swimmingly well. So if any of you, so I grew up in the 80s. I was born in 77. And so all of my formative years were 80s, early 90s. And if any of you knew Pee Wee Herman, that is my brother.
Poor Curtis, he's not here to defend himself.
In the very best of ways. Like, it was interesting that Pee Wee Herman documentary that came out. Cannot recommend it more highly. Watching that, I was like, oh my God, that's where my brother got it all. It's just like watching my brother. He mimicked him in every other just silly. He'd make costumes, he'd make up games, he'd make funny noises. He was always making noises constantly. He probably had ADHD. It was just a boy, who just constantly wanted to move. Not sure where the dividing line is on that. So Curtis was always very colorful and very funny. He still is. He's sharp. He's really quick. And so I think I always had so Curtis did not speak, not a single word to anyone but me. He did not speak out loud until he was 3 years old, which, if you've ever had kids, that's pretty alarming. Normally kids start babbling by like age, I don't know, a few months old. And certainly they learn how to say words within 6 months, year, sometime in there, they start to be able to put some simple words together. So, I spoke for him. And I think that really kind of shows the nature of our connection. I felt, I think, a very just unconscious, automatic, instinctual need to protect him because my mom was terrifying. And so, here's my little brother. And I was probably like his little mama hen. Mom would ask, do you want a cookie? And I'd say, yep, he wants two. We played games together all the time. We had friends in the neighborhood. So back in the 80s, kids were free range. So we basically were outside from sunrise to sunset and running around with all the kids in the neighborhood and exploring the forest and making up games and getting into trouble maybe every once in a while. And it was great. I mean, I have so many fun memories of both all the drama that comes along with just being a little kid and getting into arguments, but also, I just lived outdoors. I hated shoes. I'd never wear shoes unless it was like wintertime and freezing and you had to. But my brother and I, our best friends were the little neighbor kids that lived just a few doors down, and they were siblings. So, he was friends with the younger boy and I was friends with the two older girls, and we, what is that? That's 5 of us. We'd just run around and, I don't know, do whatever we wanted, really. Yeah. So sibling life was great. I was very happy, and I still talk to him frequently and still think the world of him. So I can't imagine life without him.
Mm.
Yeah.
You mentioned your grandmother being a safe space for you. What were some other parts of your childhood that maybe gave you some comfort or a sense of being able to resource yourself?
Yeah. Nature, for sure. I had a tree in my front yard so I can talk to trees. My whole life, I have always, they are so obvious to me. It's obvious that they are just their own beings. I mean, I experience trees really not much differently than I experience other people. And so, I can remember that tree in my front yard and feel its presence as if I'm remembering, one of my childhood friends. It kind of had a personality, and I experienced that tree as more female than male, but I don't know that trees quite have gender in that way. It doesn't entirely make sense, but
sure.
But there's a kind of a vibe there. And I would hang out in its branches for hours, just hours and hours. And as I came into my, as I hit puberty and everything got really intense and really weird and really dramatic, and there was a forest not too far from my house, and there was this little collection of big, huge pine trees that I'd go, there were 3 or 4 of them together, and they kind of made this semicircle in a way, and it felt protective. And so I'd go sit in those trees whenever I needed to. Forest, trees, grandma's house, also books and journaling. So I was given my own personal journal the Christmas of 1988. So I would have been 11 years old, I guess. Yeah. And I started writing in it and then never really stopped until kind of recently. So I acquired and filled dozens of journals over the years, and that helped me. It feels a little bit like if my internal world is just this like mess of papers, writing things down in a journal feels a little bit like putting things into a filing folder and maybe alphabetizing them, or just helps me make sense of my inner world. I don't journal anymore. I don't, that practice has kind of, maybe I came to the end of it, so to say, or maybe I'm just in a phase where I don't really write. I'm not sure which, but certainly in my childhood, that was critical. It was huge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious what it was like for you. You mentioned being a rebel and having that strong no or fight in your experience.
Yeah, very strong.
What did that look like as you went from childhood into your adolescence?
It just got stronger. So my parents divorced when I was in junior high. I don't know if it was 7th or 8th grade, right around there. Maybe even end of 6th grade. Anyway, so then it was just my brother and I with my mom. My dad moved the other side initially he moved into the rectory. So the rectory is where the priest lives in a Catholic church. And at the time, my dad was working primarily as the janitor for both the church and the school, the junior high that I went to. And it was our home church. There were several Catholic churches in town, and we had been attending that one since I was a kid. And so we were close with the priest, and had been because my dad worked there. And so as my family kind of blew up, I suppose, I at first was really quiet. Like life, there's about a year and a half where I don't really have any memories except maybe a few school kind of related circumstances, but certainly family life. Like I just kind of have this chunk of missing time. And then when mom kind of recovered from the blow of her and dad divorcing, and she kind of came out of her shell and found her anger and found her power again, I think in a way that gave me permission to re-engage with the world. And so I'd always been a rebel, and so that my no also came online pretty hard. And I started having sex. I started hanging out with friends that my mother did not approve of. Understandably, I'd be terrified if I had a young daughter that was hanging out with kids like that now. But they were all from a divorced family. And I think like we kind of created our own sense of family. One of them, their mom recently remarried, and she just like left the house to the kids. Like literally there were no parents in the house. And so that's where we'd have all of our parties, and I spent as much time with them as I could, usually we were partying and, just hanging out. For the most part, we didn't really get into trouble, but some of them were drug dealers. And, I was certainly in more than one situation where it was like, I don't know, somebody mentions, hey, let's go to the gas station and get cigarettes and soda pop and chips. And then next thing I know, we're making a pit stop and, one of them's doing a drug deal. Like, there's heroin in the trunk and it's,
Wow.
or pot, so that terrified me. But at the same time, it was also like there was a part of me that wanted to be involved. Like I wanted to be accepted. They were the closest thing that I had to a family at the time. And so there was just like that really, really deep primal longing that I think we all have to belong. So my rebelliousness, it was the only thing I knew how to do. And it was almost like my sense of who I was whatever my mom was not. So, my mom was very strict and followed the rules and wanted everybody to like her. And I was like, I don't care what people think about me. And I'm going to wear all black if I want and listen to Metallica and smoke cigarettes. And I tried weed a few times and didn't like it. Still don't. It just makes me feel crazy. So it was the only way I knew how to be. I started to because I wasn't really hanging out with a very good crowd, I started making some bad decisions. My mom was the clerk of court for the county, so she worked at the courthouse, and also dated a police officer for a while, and I committed a crime. She found out about it. I forged my dad's checks. And I told my dad about it the day that I forged the last one. I was like 16 at the time. And I told him, I'm like, I get paid next week. I'll pay you back. I mean, the total was like $150 maybe, or $175. So it was, chump change. And, he was really mad at me, but he also appreciated that I told him, and I paid him back. And then my mom found out about it a couple of weeks later and was livid and absolutely flew off the handle. And she had me put on probation. And I remember getting like just an absolute butt kicking verbally from my probation officer. She's a very tall, thin woman you did not want to mess with. Her name was Rose Buddha. She was a force of nature. She terrified me, but I mean, I'd sit there and nod my head, and then as soon as I was out of her office, I'd be like, well, fuck that person. I'm not going to do what she says. And so I just kept getting in trouble. They sent me to a juvenile prison, like with actual prison doors that, slid shut and locked and the whole thing. Like I had a cell. They sent me there for a long weekend once when I got in trouble doing something I wasn't supposed to do. And technically the thing that I had done was I had not gone to work like I was supposed to. I had stayed after school to try out for chamber choir, and because I wasn't following the schedule that I told them I was going to, that was like a violation of my probation. And so they sent me to this juvenile prison, and I remember sitting there at like one of the meal time, lunchtime or something with the other girls that were there, and we're like, oh, so what are you in for, kind of conversations. And my jail cell was there for murder. And And, you know, they look at me and they're like, oh, what are you in for? And I'm like, oh, I stayed after school to try out for chamber choir. You know, it was just like so absurd. So it just pissed me off. They thought it might scare me straight. That was my mom and my probation officers thinking. All it did was just make me more angry and more rebellious. So that plan did not work. And I also got sent to a youth shelter. I stayed there for a couple of weeks. While I was there, so we were kind of reaching this point, this like breakdown in, I mean, my mom was absolutely beside herself with like, what are we going to do with this kid? And she wanted me to go to this long-term, like, I think minimum stay was 6 months at a juvenile behavioral rehab place where basically you do like intensive therapy and you live there, and it's very, very strict, and there's lots of rules, and you know, it's just super, super structured. And I absolutely did not want to go. And so, you know, there was a court date pending. You know, mom had to make her arguments in front of the judge, and you know, they had to decide whether or not I should be going there. And I had a counselor, and so I'm like kind of telling her, I'm just trying to make sense of everything that I'm feeling, you know, and I'm like, I don't want to go there. And she asked me, she's like, what do you want? You know, she's like, what is it that you really want? And that was the first time an adult had asked me what I wanted. And so I didn't know how to answer her at first. And she said, you know, why don't you, this was maybe like a Thursday, and my court case was on Monday. And she's like, why don't you just take the weekend and really think through what it is that you want for yourself? And I remember, you know, I went back and I was writing in my journal, and I remember just sitting there in my bed at that youth shelter, just kind of like mulling that over in my head. And within a couple of days, I had decided that, yeah, it was probably best that I went to that facility, because I played out what my life was going to be like if I didn't. So if I didn't, I'd go back to my dad's house, and I'd have to go to school like I always did. And I would just be in this same pattern. And I was really, really miserable. And as scary as it was for me to go to somewhere that I didn't know what it would be like, I also had to kind of like really admit to myself just how miserable I was in my current situation. And so I was like, well, maybe it would be for the best. And so I went, and I turned 18 there, and I graduated from high school early, and I went right from there to college. So that my rebelliousness, I mean, I was still a rebel after that, certainly, but that was the moment where I started to be able to figure out for myself, what do I really want or need, as opposed to just being in contradiction to everyone and everything around me. And so that was really important. I mean, that was kind of probably the start of healing my inner rebel, and learning how to shift into a bigger part of myself that isn't just always in contradiction and fighting, because that shit's exhausting. So yeah.
And so then you went off to college.
I did. Yeah.
How did that play out in your story?
I went to a community college a couple hours away from home. It was great. I lived in the dorms, drank a lot, partied a lot. But I was a good student, always had been. I always got good grades. Like, school had always come easily for me. I liked to read. I could write really well. I liked learning things that I didn't understand. Like it was easy for me to focus, still is. And I have always been attracted to psychology. So like, I remember at the age of about 10 or so picking up books at the library from William James, who's like, this really serious, he's considered the father of kind of modern Western psychology. Of course, I didn't understand any of it at age 10, but philosophy and psychology, and science more broadly, but specifically kind of the psychology section of science has always fascinated me. I think really initially out of desperation, because my inner experience always felt so painful. And just this sense of like, life is like, it's not supposed to be this hard. Like it's just like, why am I in such pain? I didn't understand. My own mind felt absolutely terrifying. And so in school, I remember telling my mom, like, I think I probably told her I want to be a therapist or a psychologist, one of the two. And she literally laughed in my face and she's like, you can't be a psychologist. She's like, you don't know anything. And, technically she was right about that. I didn't know anything at the age of 18 or 19, whenever that was. But I believed her. Like, I just gave up on, like, I swallowed her words whole and completely internalized them and just concluded, well, I guess I can't be a psychologist. Like, that's just not an option for me. Which is kind of interesting that my rebel didn't kick in around that.
That is curious.
Yeah. And so I thought about, I was doing a astronomy class, and I was like, well, maybe I'll be an astronomer. I really loved astronomy, but holy cow, there's so much math, and math is not my strong suit. And so I was like, okay, I can't be an astronomer. There's way too much math. And so I ended up declaring a business major just to declare something. And then I went to Iowa State after I graduated from community college. And with only one semester remaining, I dropped out because I did not have any idea what I really wanted to do. And I am someone who will not follow through with something that I do not genuinely want to do. It was kind of like when I was growing up in the Catholic Church, at the age of like 14 or 15 or 16, whatever it is, you're supposed to get confirmed. And I refused to go to confirmation class. And I told my mom, I was like, I am not getting confirmed. And, I think at that point she was so exhausted from fighting. And, I think my mom and dad were pretty recently divorced. And, I remember her asking me, well, why not? And I said, because I don't, like, they're asking me to commit. Like, I don't believe any of this stuff. Like, I can't stand up there in front of God and everybody declaring myself, that I believe blah, blah, whatever the things are that they want you to say. And I was like, I just can't, it's not true for me. And delightfully, she didn't force me to. And that was great. So it was a very similar kind of feeling. Like, I can't follow through with this because this just isn't true for me. And so I moved to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, to live with a girl that I went to that I had met at the behavioral rehab place. Her and we became close friends there and had kind of stayed in touch quite a lot. She had joined the Air Force and she was out, and that started the kind of the next chapter of my life after college. Yeah, but that was college. College was great. College was I did well, but I was still pretty tortured. Like, my inner world was still really painful, and I was like, everything just always felt confusing, and like I didn't know I never had a sense of like what was true or which end was up. It was sort of normal for me.
So here you are in your early 20s,
Mm-hmm.
and you're making another big move into a new town. What did your 20s look like?
So Carrie's rebellious streak continues. I love anything countercultural. So I met a guy who was the equivalent of a Chippendale dancer. I don't think actually Chippendale dancers existed in Iowa in the late 1990s, but early 2000s. But some little local outfit that men who danced for money for bachelorette parties and stuff like that. So he was a very pretty man. He was beautiful, tall, charming. And I just fell head over heels. His name was Mark. And he asked me, he's like, hey, he's like, we could start our own business. Like, would you be interested in dancing as well? But, obviously for men, we could do birthday parties and just whatever, men getting together, hiring strippers kind of situations. And I was like, yeah, sure. That sounds fun. So I had a regular day job. I was kind of like an office manager at a audiology practice by day, and then by night, I worked my ass off. We were very busy. We ran that business for 5 years. During the summer, we'd hire, extra men and women to dance for us because summertime was busy seasons when everybody gets married and goes out and has fun. That was a hell of a lot of fun. And at the same time, my relationship with Mark was awful. It was so abusive. Oh God. He has been diagnosed clinically as a narcissist. So I don't just throw that term around. Like, I know, on social media nowadays, like everybody talks about, oh, he's such a narcissist. He's clinically been diagnosed as a narcissist. I think with some sociopathic tendencies, if I put my little psychologist brain on. So I did eventually go back to school and become a real psychologist. Mark, he was like very charming, and he'd just love bomb you. Like, he totally went at, there were people who thought he walked on water. But for those of us who actually knew him, we got to see like the monster control side of Mark. And so I was physically, emotionally, and sexually abused for almost 6 years. We had a daughter together, and not until the very end of our relationship, I had actually, God, it's so tragic. So I had every summer, I would try to leave him. And one summer I actually like moved out and got my own place, and that was huge. So this is like 5 years into the relationship. I'd tried to leave him 4 times before that. I got my own apartment. I don't think I had talked to him for, let's say, a week and a half, 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And he reached out and he talked me into, let's go shoot pool. And we shot pool, and like, I wasn't totally taken him back or anything like that. Anyway, a couple days after that, I found out that I was pregnant. So he and I had sex like right before I left and got my own place. And then I'd missed my period, and I found out I was pregnant. And that would have been the 4th pregnancy with him, and I'd had 3 abortions prior to that. And when I got pregnant that 4th time, there was just something in me that was like, I just cannot, like, you know, so at this point I'm 25 years old. There was something in me that was like, okay, it's time to do the adult thing and take responsibility for what has happened. And so I ended up moving back in with him. I was awful. It was probably the darkest time of my life. But we had a daughter, and she was happy and healthy and beautiful. And we can go into life with Bianca, but when she was maybe 4 months old, 5 months old, she was really little, and I saw him treat her the way he would treat me. So he, you know, I don't need to go into details, but he basically yelled at her. I mean, just, you know, this like selfish, self-important, loud swearing at her. She's an infant. She's crying in her infant seat because she was probably hungry or needed changed. And he didn't want to stop what he was doing. And so he was yelling at her to shut up and be quiet, and, you know, using swear words. And I watched it, and it was like there was a flip of a switch inside of me. And I was like, that's it. That we're done. I knew at that moment that I had to figure out an exit plan, and our finances were intertwined. And I had tried to leave him before, like he'd threatened to, I mean, he'd stalked me before, and he'd like slashed my tires, and he locked me in a basement once for a week when I tried to leave. So like I knew I had to be really smart about my exit strategy. And I got all of our finances kind of separated in a way that he wasn't aware of. And I called my mom and my dad, and I was like, on this day, you know, he's going to be out of the house for enough hours that gives us time to pack things up, and, you know, we're going to go. And I went back home because home was like 2.5 hours away. So it was far enough away that it gave us some distance. And he knew that like my mom was, you know, good friends with the police officers and judges in town, and he was terrified of my mom. So I suppose my mom's little bulldog kind of really came in handy at that point. And that's what I did. And I left. And Bianca it was right before she turned 2. She was like 1.5 years, maybe. So that was my 20s. Yeah, that was that chapter.
So you leave an incredibly toxic relationship and land back home.
Yeah.
And actually feel safety and protection from your mom.
Yeah, very much so.
That's interesting. How did things change in your relationship as now you were a mother, she was a grandmother?
Yeah.
And what did the next little bit of your life look like?
So a month after I moved home, Mom got diagnosed with lung cancer. Maybe 2 months. I mean, it was like pretty much immediately. And so she'd never smoked. Who knows? Who knows what the lung cancer was from? And so very quickly, like all the dynamics changed. You know, I remember her saying to me, she's like, here, I thought I was rescuing you, and it turns out you were coming home to rescue me. Having Bianca around was what softened our kind of vibe together. She was also, and said as much, she was really proud of me for leaving Mark and handling the end of that situation as well as I did. You know, she had told me about a year before I left Mark. I remember I probably called her on the phone telling her about whatever the latest drama was. And she told me, she's like, Carrie, I know it's a matter of when, not if you leave him. And so and I will never forget those words. And they had such a huge impact on my belief in myself that I was eventually going to figure out how to do this. And with her cancer diagnosis, like that was another thing that really chilled her out. I mean, she wasn't nearly so just harsh. Like she just had an edge to her most of my life that I found really, really painful. But cancer, I mean, her and I think were genuine friends for at least a good year and a half. So I stayed home for a couple of years. She ended up living with that cancer diagnosis for 5 years before it finally took her. And she went into remission. So she was without kind of the cancer for 6 months, and then it came back. And then my brother came home to take care of her at that point when it came back the second time. But that time with her was really precious. She delighted in Bianca. Just, it was so sweet. She's like, she brings so much joy, and she goes, I can't imagine going through this cancer with, by myself in my own home. And she's like, I'm just so grateful to have this little bundle of light and joy. Bianca was such a happy kid, and easy. She'd put herself down for a nap when she got too tired, like at the age of 2. She slept through the night. She loved to sleep. She played anything would entertain her. She loved bugs and snakes and worms. Every time it'd rain, she'd get so excited and she'd be like, Mom, can we go dig for worms? She was just in love with life. I think probably like any healthy kid is. So I enjoyed that time at home. I didn't really, so I had started going back to school when I was still with Mark, finishing my bachelor's degree. So, having a kid kind of makes you want to get serious about life, I think. And so I finished my bachelor's in business. And my last semester, I took a workplace psychology class, and I had no idea that was even a thing. And I was in love instantly. I was like, oh my God, I can put together psychology and business. Like, this is perfect. So I found a master's program online that allowed me to, still work full time, and because I was taking care of Mom, and I had Bianca, and then also going to grad school. Oh, by the way, I was also training for a marathon. So like in all of my spare time. So I was in this phase of like a ton of work, and I don't know how I did it. I don't know how I did all of that all at the same time. But when you're in your 20s and early 30s, I think you just kind of have boundless energy. That just is the time to do stuff like that. So, I started kind of putting out feelers to date, like maybe a year and a half after I left home. I was very intentional about taking time to just not even think about relationships. And Mom had been diagnosed with cancer, and I just had, so it was just a good time for slow kind of turning inward and focusing on family. And I started to date, and I met this guy named Zach, and he was going to med school down in Des Moines. And for our first date, I was like, hey, why don't you come up and we'll go kayaking there's this really great little creek that my mom and I would go on, before she got cancer. And it's like a 6-mile run, and mom was like, I could drop you off, and then you just call me when you're done and I'll come pick you up. And I was like, we could pack a lunch. There's a great little spot to sit on the side of the bank and just have some turkey sandwiches. And he was an outdoors type as well, and so he thought that was a pretty cool first date. And so he came up, and I mean, I think both of us fell in love almost from first sight. Like, we both just really, really liked each other right away. But he only had 2 weeks of med school left, and the Des Moines Medical School doesn't have residencies. Like, they're not connected to any kind of hospital system, so you have to go find your residencies elsewhere in the United States. And so he's like, I'm leaving in 2 weeks to go start or not residencies, rotations. Sorry. So like 2 years of rotations. So you got to go do like a primary care rotation and a emergency medicine, like all the different specialties. You got to go rotate through them. And he's like, I'm going to Detroit, and then I got to go to Philly, and then I got to go to California, and then I got to, wherever, just all over. And I'm like, well, I guess we'll do a long distance relationship. And so we did. And when he was in Michigan, we'd meet halfway in Chicago. We did that for like 9 months. I kind of go see him once a month maybe, or once every other month, and talked on the phone a lot. And he kind of got cold feet and freaked out partway through, and so we'd kind of take a break, and then he'd decide that he wanted to try again. And so I went to go see him graduate. I had met his mom in that time frame. I had a conference for organizational psychologists out in California where his mom lives. And so I met her there and got to know her a little bit. And then her and I went to his graduation when he was done with his rotations. And by this time, so mom was in remission, and I decided to move to Iowa City to be closer to Bianca's dad. So he was still in Cedar Rapids. He had appeared to have gotten his shit together. He married a woman that is absolutely incredible. Her and I always had a really close relationship, still do. They were pregnant with their first child. They ended up having two, and he wanted to spend as much time with Bianca as he possibly could. Like, he was always asking me for extra time. Can she stay a long weekend? Can she come? He had kind of a big family, and he always wanted her to, be with grandma and grandpa or cousins or aunts and uncles and stuff. And I can't fault him for that at all. And he had a steady job and like wasn't doing his manipulative bullshit. Like, he just kind of put on his good boy act. And my mom, I remember my mom, we went out for lunch once or something, or we went to Cedar Rapids maybe it was after he had his first child. And I remember my mom, we got back into the car, and she looked at me and she's like, I think Mark is like a nice guy now. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I'm like, this is just bizarre. I mean, I was so relieved because obviously, he's the father of my child, and I want whatever is best for her. Mm-hmm. And he started asking me to let her come live with them. And I did not know about that. I mean, I was just that, my gut was just like, absolutely fucking not. But then my heart was really torn because on the one hand, obviously I loved her dearly and I didn't want to be apart from her ever. And she really, really adored her dad. And now she had a little baby sister, and his family is actually all really lovely people. None of them are narcissists. They're all normal humans, just doing the best they can. And so I said, well, why don't we try it out for a summer? She can come stay with you for the summer. She'll come, visit me on the weekends, kind of like every other weekend sort of thing. And he told me, he's like, I will never keep her from you. Like, if you want more time with her the way that you've been giving me more time with her, he's like, I just would really love to have her closer. And I was like, okay, let's just try it for a summer and we'll see how it goes. And Zach that was the summer that Zach got residency in Pennsylvania. He got matched, as they say, matched into his program. And I went to go see him, and so anyway, the summer went really well, and I agreed to let Bianca go live with her dad, and I was living in Iowa City, so I was really close by, like half hour away. And then in September, Zach was like, hey, do you want to come see me in Pennsylvania? Like, I've settled here in Pennsylvania. And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to come see you. And I think I went for a week. And he said to me that last day, he's like, I think I would really love for you to come stay with me here in Pennsylvania. And I was like, I got to think about that. And so I went home and I took a couple weeks to just feel through what that meant. Yeah, there didn't seem to be any easy answer, because my attachment to Zach and my love, I knew that he and I were going to get married. I was in love with him from the moment I saw him, and he was not abusive. It was the first healthy relationship I'd ever had. And he was a doctor, and he was smart and worldly, and so I ended up moving to Pennsylvania, and I thought that would be best for B. I thought maybe it would be easier for B because going back and forth between our house every weekend she was staying in a different house, and that was really taking a toll on her. I mean, that was hard to kind of be living out of a suitcase for, every weekend. And I think I rationalized that, maybe it would be easier for her, to be in one place for months at a time. And, I could go see her whenever I wanted. She could come stay with me for the whole month of December. Mark was like, we can have her take extra time from school. They can send her homework with her or whatever. She can have a long Christmas break or something. And I calculated actually the number of days that I'd be getting with her every year would be the same. It just, rather than every other weekend, I'm gonna have long chunks. And so that's kind of how I rationalized it. I was like, really, I'm not seeing her any less. It's just, I'm gonna have kind of longer breaks in between our visitation. That did not turn out to be a good decision. But it's the one that I made. Life with Zach in Pennsylvania was really good. He proposed in December that year after I moved there. So just a couple months after I moved in. Said yes, of course. We got married in 2010. And my mom died 2 weeks before I was married. We thought she'd make it. She had a wedding dress, or she had a dress for the wedding and everything. She had her plane tickets bought. She ended up kind of going a little bit faster than we expected. And I missed Bianca more than I'm gonna start crying. Um, oof, God, those years were hard.
Mhm.
um, I didn't find out until, like, I think probably that first year was okay with her dad. But then she started really adamantly, like, Mom, I want to come live with you. Mom, I want to come live with you. Like, I miss you. And her and I, we've like FaceTimed each other constantly. we talk to each other every day for hours. um, and she started getting really adamant. And then so I started trying to have conversations with Mark about it. And then he started not being so supportive of me spending more time with her. And just like the old Mark started coming out again. And I found out from Steph years later that, I mean, things were as abusive with her as they always were with me. Mark just, he does the thing a narcissist does. And if he needs you to think that he's a good guy, he can present that and you will not know. I mean, the fact that he managed to bamboozle my mom is like profound. But anyway, that act, he couldn't keep it up for forever. And so kind of all the old Mark started being revealed. And, then by that point, Bianca had been living there for, let's say, a year and a half, 2 years. And I filed for custody, and that started a years-long custody battle. During that time, Bianca got diagnosed with a genetic disorder called neurofibromatosis type 2, which is a genetic disorder that grows brain tumors. She was 12 when she got diagnosed, and she had the most aggressive form of the mutation. And of course, being married to a doctor, the first thing I did was like, what the fuck is neurofibromatosis type 2? And what does this mean? And, the doctors, they don't, they sugarcoat everything. Like, and they would do that with my mom with her cancer stuff too. And my mom, then she'd go home and go do a bunch of research and read a bunch of papers. And so, when Zach and I found out about the diagnosis, I was like, okay, unleash your doctor brain, like help me understand what's going on. And I remember I had this paper that was about like mortality rates, so like death rates and NF2. And there was this graph that showed the 4 main types of mutations, and the one that she had, being the most aggressive, and it showed this mortality line where like, it was like normal until about the age of like 18, 19, 20, 22, and then just like drops off a cliff. And so, she had like a maybe 40% chance of still being alive by the age of 30. And of course, quality of life, I mean, is horrific. And so that certainly amped up the pressure to get her home with me. And I eventually was successful. I think it took me like it was almost a year after she was diagnosed. Court cases are just ungodly slow. She'd been through chemo. They didn't want to do brain surgeries, until like the tumors got big enough that they started causing problems, because, as soon as you cut them out, they're going to just grow right back again. So her mutation was essentially so every kind of like muscle fiber, every cell has like a grow function and it has a stop function. So, it tells the cell when to grow and then when to stop. And her particular mutation, there are specific cells in her brain that they didn't have the stop grow function in her DNA code. It was just missing. And so there were certain parts of her brain that just grew and grew and grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. I think I want to pause and just kind of ask you, because I could keep going in a million different directions, and I think I'm feeling a little sort of like I'm following some rabbit trails, and I'm curious where we should go.
So that's heavy, everything that you've shared, and a lot of emotion.
Yeah.
So I just want to acknowledge that that is deeply felt. I've heard that story many times.
Yeah.
It still hits me.
Thank you.
Pretty deeply, yeah. So in the arc of your story, you are married, you're in PA, there's a custody battle.
Yeah.
What brought you to Texas, where we met?
Yeah.
And an intentional community that you were a part of starting east of Austin.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So when residency was done in Pennsylvania, we had to figure out where we wanted to go live. We did not like Pennsylvania. It was Western PA, so like hour and a half away from Pittsburgh, referred to by the locals as Pennsyltucky. It was like old steel mill country. It just was not my vibe, nor his, being a coastal California boy. So we looked at Raleigh, North Carolina, went and interviewed there, and Austin, and almost went to Raleigh. He had a job offer there that we initially accepted, and then recruiter from Austin area reached out and kind of wooed him away, and we came and visited down here, and I mean, just totally fell in love with the Austin area. And so we moved here in 2012, just north of Austin in Georgetown. And I got custody of Bianca a couple of years later. And marriage with Zach, residency was really hard, but marriage was good. And I wasn't unhappy with him until toward the end. So we were never really monogamous, intentionally, like, consciously. It's not like that we didn't cheat on each other, but, from the very beginning, like it started as, I would make a comment about a woman in the bar where we were at if she was beautiful. And so we would like co-admire, another human. So I'm definitely not the jealous type, or at least I wasn't in that context. Pennsylvania did not have a, steel mill country. Pennsyltucky does not have a swinger scene. So we didn't really do anything with our conversations around like what would it be like to have an open marriage, and but we were having those conversations really from the beginning. He was very flirtatious. The nurses at the hospital like just adored him. He'd bring home little love notes from them and show them to me. And I was like, oh, look at you, you're adoring fans. So it was, none of it was a secret. Sometimes there were some uncomfortable feelings, but we talked about it. And we were madly in love with one another. Like, he was just I thought the world of him. And I think, he of me. And so when we moved to Austin, like Austin definitely has a swinger scene. It's got a great swinger scene and BDSM community. And we kind of dipped our toe into both, got to know some really, really wonderful people, some of whom, I still keep in like semi-contact with. That part of our relationship, it's not what ended our marriage, but how do I want to put this? Zach, he's got a lot of wounding, kind of childhood trauma around certain things. I mean, I'm not going to like tell his story, but the way it manifested in our relationship was fear of and distrust of other people. Zach kind of thinks about his experience in life as if he's kind of getting the bad end of the stick, or as if it's not fair. And so, for example, like in our kind of open relationship, it was always really painful for him the way it's kind of easier for a woman to find partners in a swinging community than it is for men to find partners to, not necessarily, I mean, not just sleep with, but, whatever, the full spectrum of sexual experiences, and anything from just like flirting to like actual sex with another person. And so like he had this very sensitive kind of fairness or justice streak in him. And that, I think, caused him to assess circumstances and experiences that we had in a rather harsh way. And over time, it kind of took its toll. And I am somebody who, I don't like to be constrained. I mean, I'm a rebel, right? Like, I don't like to be told what to do. I don't want to feel like I'm put in a box too much. And so our inability to have and find close friends, that was becoming really hard. Like, I was just feeling more and more isolated, and he was kind of getting more and more bitter, or at least that's how I experienced him. And so we started going to therapy, and because I think there was just some like, how when you haven't communicated well for a long time, and then you try to figure out how to communicate well. Like, it's just really, it's hard.
It sucks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you've got some ingrained bad habits and then you're trying to undo them, it was really, I mean, we tried. He had a girlfriend at, was one of the nurses that he had worked with at one of the hospitals, and oh God, she was madly in love with him. She was really sweet. I mean, I liked her a lot, actually. So her and I knew each other and hung out sometimes. And when I suggested that, maybe I get a boyfriend or just, he was okay with me having just sex with other men, but not any kind of emotional connection. And that didn't really work for me. And so when I mentioned like, well, what if, I find, he was a hard no. So I was like, well, that's not really very fair. I got invited to a meetup down in Austin that was called Authentic Relating, from this friend I had met through a group therapy thing. And she was like, hey, I think you might really like this. And I did. So Authentic Relating prior to COVID was, it had started in Austin probably 10 years prior to when I found it in 2018. And the woman who kind of founded the movement, so the whole event was essentially a 2-hour, what she called a games night. And it was just a group of people, maybe 10 to 50 people, come together for a couple of hours. There's a facilitator or 2 or 3 who walk you through, okay, for 15 minutes, we're going to do this quote unquote game. It's just a structured activity. Person A, you're, just, for example, naming what you feel. And then person B is going to name what they feel in response. So it was all about training like emotional awareness, attunement to your body, how to have a conflict conversation. Like she had a games manual of, games that she created and others in the community over the years. And some of them are one-on-one games. Some of them were group games. Some of them are small group, like 3 or 4 or 5 people. Absolute delight. Here was this room full of like curious, open, vulnerable humans just trying to figure out their own human experience. And it was like everything that I was looking for. So I very excitedly went home and I told Zach about it, and he immediately was just like, I don't know, that sounds kind of fucking weird. And I'm like, well, I think you should at least come and see what you think. And he hated it. He hated it. And I was kind of devastated about that in a way, because I knew that if he didn't like it and I did, it was going to become a problem. Like he would feel threatened or just kind of try to undermine it. And that is kind of what happened over the next year. So there was like this perfect storm of open relationship kind of not going so well, and years of not great communication habits, and lots of codependency, and me being, I didn't have any friends. He and I didn't have any friends. So I was really isolated and just like, I felt like my soul was dying. And so I told him, I'm like, I need community. Like I need people. I need friends in my life. And from an open relationship context, like I need, if you can't have a girlfriend and have that be okay, and the same not be true for me. And he was not okay with that. And so I was just like, well, then I guess we need to get a divorce. Like, I didn't, so that's what we did. We got a divorce. It was probably the most amicable, peaceful divorce in all of human history. We didn't fight. He was just like, whatever you need, like, I want to make sure you're taken care of. So.
And say a little bit about the dynamic between him and B.
Oh yeah, Bianca.
Mm-hmm.
So, he adored her. Like, so she had known him since, like, I met him when she was 3, maybe 4. So we moved when she was 2, and I took a year and a half. So yeah, 3.5 years old. And so, basically for all of her conscious life, he'd come home and she'd reach out, give him a hug, fly into his lap, say, tell me about your day. I've got lots of really cute videos of the two of them just being cute together. And at the same time, he had his own child that he didn't get to see grow up because mom took her to Canada when she was really young. And so there was this like pain for him being close to Bianca just reminded him of what he missed out on with his own daughter. His daughter moved in with us as soon as she graduated from high school and moved from Canada down into Austin. And they're now really close. So he and B had a close relationship, but then when we divorced, he was like, well, if she wants to keep in touch with me, she can reach out to me. And I'm like, at the time she was like 15 when we divorced. And I was like, she's a kid. Like it's not her job to maintain y'all's relationship. Like that's your job. And he just he didn't want to. I think it was too painful for him. And I mean, in truth, I can't really fault him for that. I mean, it's his decision. I don't have any control over him. So that was pretty hard for B, I think. We decided to separate in like January. In February, the doctors told us it's time for Bianca's first brain surgery. And then in March, she had her brain surgery. And in April, our divorce was finalized. So it was like a hell of a year.
Mm-hmm.
It was awful. But he was there for the surgery, even though it was really, I mean, it was just like raw, painful for both of us. And yet at the same time, I mean, he didn't, I don't, it would have been more painful for him to be apart from us and in that kind of experience. And her first brain surgery went pretty well. I mean, as well as it could have. It left one side of her face paralyzed. And she lost hearing in that ear. But she could still hear out of the other ear. So, intentional community. So, I dove headfirst into that authentic relating community. There was kind of a core group of people that had been going long term. I became really good friends with the woman who started the whole thing, Sarah, and ended up buying a house with a man who had been trained by Sarah and started an authentic relating community in Hawaii. And then he moved to Texas in 2019, and then COVID hit. And then in July of 2020, so Chris and I had been talking about wanting to buy a piece of property and start our own community, you know, acres of land. He loved to farm. He'd been kind of through a permaculture farming training thing when he was in Hawaii. And so wanted to bring that to Texas. And so we bought a house out here in Bastrop, 7 acres, and Sarah came, put a tiny house on it, and we had another friend live with us, and Chris's dad moved in, and my brother lived with us, and my daughter. And we hosted all kinds of events and gatherings and just dinner parties. And I mean, it was idyllic. We had a little farm. It was exactly what I needed. So I was, how do I say this? I was waking up. I mean, I was finally coming to that place where it's like, I need to, it's so funny. It's so hard to put into words. Like, for example, I would wake up in the morning and I was suddenly starting to like crystals, like, you know, the pretty rocks. And I didn't quite know what I was tuning into, but like I knew that there was something there. And so you have to keep in mind, like, I had been an atheist since my 20s, and so now I'm in my 40s. And you know, I'm like, this is some woo-woo bullshit, but here I am just like collecting these pretty rocks and feeling them and like, you know, energetically like, oh yeah, the rose quartz is different than the tiger eye, and I don't really like malachite because it kind of gives me evil demon feeling. You know, it's just absurd. So it's like my energetic body, as the yogis say, was kind of waking up. And I had been working remote since Pennsylvania days. And so that afforded me the ability to like kind of take a break between meetings, and I would go take a walk on our property, and like I was finding the language for my own inner experience, you know, like labeling my emotions really for the first time. I think prior to, like, when I was married to Zach, I had words. I could tell you if I was mad or sad or happy or like depressed or angry. And that was about it. That very rudimentary kinds of labels for my emotional experience. And so I was kind of feeling like, what's the difference between disappointment and resentment, or the difference between, being like joyful and being delighted. So everything was like getting more and more pixelated. And I was also doing lots of psychedelics, which is why I think suddenly I was able to feel rocks. So like my whole world was opening up, and the humans that I was surrounded by were also all going through the same kinds of experiences in their own way. And so, we would have really incredible conversations about consciousness and pain and loss and just the full spectrum. And, having a kid who's got brain tumors and is, I knew that we were going to be lucky for her to make it to past the age of like 22. And her and I were having conversations about her death. Mm-hmm. And, how do you want to live your life? Mm-hmm. And I took her out of school during, like, shortly after she moved to Texas. She went to high school for a little bit, but her brain tumors caused a lot of dizziness and fatigue. And like, her school had stairs, and like, she was literally just like, she almost fell down the stairs a couple of times because her balance would get off. And I mean, she didn't have the stamina to sit through a full school day anymore. And it was just like, I remember she came home once and she's like, "Mom, this is so dumb." She's like, they're talking about, some stupid war on the other side of the world that happened in like 17 whatever. And she's like, I don't care. She's like, why do I need to know that? I'm going to be dead by the time I'm 25. And I'm like, yeah, you're not wrong. So, when your life is maybe going to be 25 years long, like, you just have a very, very different kind of perspective on what matters and what doesn't.
Sure.
And she loved horses and she'd been riding ever since she was like, I don't know, 7 years old or something. And so I was like, what do you want to do? She's like, I want to hang out with the horses. And so I said, okay, then you can go hang out. And she did. She trained horses. She rode them. She'd sleep with them in the field if I would have let her. So that community was exactly what I needed, and it was exactly what Bianca needed until it wasn't. So yeah, what do you want to say?
Yeah, let's talk just a little bit about your experience with Bianca there at the end.
Yeah.
And we will save our next couple podcasts for talking about how we connected.
Oh yeah.
And what
telling
that
our story.
Yeah.
Sure.
Together.
Yeah.
So how did it look and feel? What was your experience as things got closer for Bianca's passing?
God awful. She was dizzy almost all the time. She was exhausted. She had dozens and dozens and dozens of tumors in her head. Some of them really big, some of them really small. She had trouble, just simple things like trying to figure out what to eat. Like, nothing ever sounded good. And so she would sometimes just hide in her room, and sometimes I wouldn't see her for days. And, I'd of course knock on her door, and I'd send her texts and, can I get you anything? Do you need anything? Can I come in? Do you want to talk? Her pattern was to retreat and hide and go away until she was ready to come out. And then, God, I can't tell. My heart would just leap for joy so she was a morning person like I was, and she loved coffee in the mornings just like I do. And when she was feeling better, she'd be sitting on the couch, and sometimes she'd be up before me. And so I'd come down the stairs from my bedroom and I'd see her sitting on the couch, and I'd get so excited because I knew that her and I were going to get to sit and have coffee together in the morning. And she would, she had this little folder spot on her phone where she would save little memes and like pictures and stuff that she thought I would like. And then she'd like catch me up to date on her, what I had missed since she'd been hiding in her bedroom. And she's like, "Oh, do you want to see all my memes?" And I was like, "Yes." And so we'd sit there for either 30 minutes or 2 hours, however long it took, however long she'd tolerate connecting with me. And so like certainly the last couple of years of her life were basically that. Just sometimes she wanted to be close, but a lot of the time she was just really, really, really struggling and in a lot of pain. And about 6 months before she died, I had this like pervasive feeling, and the only way I knew how to describe it was, how when you're looking out at the ocean, if there's a big submarine coming up from the bottom, and it, as it's coming up, it's like making the surface of the ocean sort of bow out and flex from the pressure. And it felt like that, like my internal experience. I'm like, there's something coming and I don't know what it is. I had a sneaking suspicion that it was probably her death, but it felt like something rising up from the depths for like 6 months, MRIs and brain scans and lots of tests later. We eventually were told that, brain tumors are getting too big again. It's time to do another surgery. So this would have been her third one. When we got to the hospital, I mean, it was like, I could just, everything was different. It was like walking into a twilight zone. Everything went wrong that could have. In some ways, her brain surgery was a quote unquote success. I mean, in the sense that like they removed the tumors and she didn't die on the operating table, but it left her deaf in both ears. It left her unable to swallow. So she needed to have a feeding tube. And there was this kind of horror show of her figuring out how to breathe, and she was in the ICU for a long, long time. And anyway, we were there for about 2.5 weeks, and it was an utter fucking nightmare. And she would write to me, so she couldn't talk, and she couldn't hear. And so she could just like write barely, and she was so fatigued. I mean, she lost so much weight when she was in the hospital. She was already skin and bones. And she'd kind of write on her whiteboard, "I just want to die. Please just take me home. I just want to die. I want to get out of here. I don't want to do this anymore." Just over and over and over again. And this is a girl who had been living with an enormous amount of pain and hardship for a very long time, and ostensibly handling it really well, or at least as well as can be expected for like a teenager. But that experience in the hospital just utterly broke her. And I can't describe what it's like to watch your own child. Like, there was nothing I could do. She was hooked up to machines. She was struggling to breathe. She couldn't walk. She couldn't hear. She was in an enormous amount of pain. Like, there was nothing I could do. And all she wanted to do was die. And I could feel her soul she was just crushed. She lost. Yeah, it was like too much. was like more than she could handle. And I couldn't hold it for her. And so it was awful. So we figured out how to convince the doctors to let us out of there, and got her like well enough anyway for her to come home. And after a little, when she got home, I think she was relieved enough that she considered like, oh, okay, maybe I should fight. Like maybe I should try to get better and go to all my rehab. And so we went to a couple of her rehab appointments, and it was just awful. It was like every signal from the universe just telling us the time is it's done. Time has come. And so she woke up on the winter solstice in 2021, December 21st. And so I was sleeping in bed with her because, of course, like she couldn't talk and she couldn't walk. So like if she needed to go to the bathroom or needed something in the middle of the night, I had to be there. And she kind of nudges me awake at 4:00 in the morning, and she grabs her phone to type me a message. And she's like, I think I'm done. Like, I think it's time. And I looked at her and I said, okay, like, what do you need from me? Like, what can I do for you? And she typed back, she's like, but won't this be hard for you? Like, like if I give up and like, if I'm gone, like, won't that be hard for you? And I was just like, I probably burst into tears and laughed at the same time. And I was just like, honey, of course it's going to be hard for me, but that is not what you should be thinking of right now. like my job is to love you and support you. And I mean, I just want what's best for you. And she, like, from that moment on, we got up and she's like, can I take a shower? And she's like, I want to shave my head. And I was like, okay, yeah, let's shave your head. And so I shaved her head and she took a shower. She always had this very long, elaborate shower routine with lots of like lotions and soaps and oils, and it was really delightful. And so she took her long, luxurious shower, and we put on some fresh clothes, and she was like transformed in a way that I don't have words for. It was like being in the presence of a little Buddha. I mean, she was pure peace and joy. And not to say that she wasn't, I mean, she was still in pain, but there was no more suffering. She just leaned fully into her knowing that her time had come, and she died 3 days later at home, surrounded by all of the humans who loved her the most, and her dog on her lap. And so, like, that community was my lifeline. I mean, I can't even fathom what that whole, the last couple of years of her life would have been like without that community. Mm-hmm. And we had her cremated and buried her in the front yard. She wanted to be buried under a white oak tree. And so one of the community members who knows a lot about plants, he found us a good white oak, kind of in a 5-gallon, tree sapling, probably a few years old. And we buried her on the property. And it was lovely, and it was like the most awful, surreal thing I've ever experienced in my life. Not having her here is It doesn't make sense to my brain. It's like if you walked outside and suddenly, the sky was pixelated pink. It just doesn't belong. And at the same time, there's also some part of me who knows, or maybe it's like I trust that what happened, like her life and our life together, and the fact that I got to be her mom through all of that, like there is something about all of that that is perfect and beautiful, and it's just right. And there's no, I mean, even though it's tragic and painful and awful, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody, it just is, and it's beautiful, and it's just a part of life. Even though there's a part of me that like can't accept it, and where it doesn't make any sense, and then it's very strange. It's like then there's also this other part of me that's like, yeah, but it belongs, because this is just what life is about. I mean, I'm certainly not the only mom who's had to bury their own child, and parents have to bury their children every day. And there is a gift in being given that lesson to learn about life, the way that tragedy can be inherent in it, and you either can turn and look at it and try to wrap your arms around it and hold it and learn how to love it, or you can turn your head away and deny it and get mad at it, or I mean, we can react to it in any, and it's not to say that like there's a better way to react. Everybody's got their own experience, but it's just, there is something, it's an honor. So that was my girl. Yeah, she died when she was 18, just the day before, just a few hours before Christmas. It was like 10:30 at night, Christmas Eve.
Thank you for so beautifully sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we met 2 months later, so there's not much more to my story left prior to meeting you.
Stay tuned to next time when the protagonist says, "What? I'm going to start dating?"
Yeah, because that's what you do when your daughter dies.
I love you.
Yeah, I love you too.
Thanks, y'all, for listening.
Yeah.